Hi, I'm Julia, and welcome back to the English Talk community. I'm so glad you're here. If you're listening to this episode, it means you care about your English and you're doing something to improve it. That already sets you apart. You're showing up, and that's the most important step. Today, I want to talk about something that can completely change how you speak English and how comfortable you feel in conversations. It's not about memorizing more words. It's not about grammar rules. It's about listening. Yes, listening. Really listening. That's the secret. Let me ask you something. Have you ever been in a situation where someone was talking to you in English, and even though you knew most of the words, you just couldn't understand what they said? You maybe froze for a second, smiled politely, and hoped they wouldn't notice that you missed something. That moment is so familiar for many of us, and it's frustrating, right? You might think, why can I read English and write it, but I still struggle when people speak to me? If you've felt that way, you are absolutely not alone. And I want you to know, it's not your fault. English, like any language, sounds different when spoken naturally. Native speakers don't pronounce every word clearly. They connect sounds, they speak fast, they use expressions you don't learn in school. That's why listening is the real bridge between the English you know and the English you can use. If you want to have clear, natural conversations in English, you have to train your ears first. That's what this episode is all about. When we think about learning a new language, many people imagine speaking first. They focus on how to say things, how to pronounce correctly, how to use the right words. And yes, speaking is important. But what if I told you that improving your listening skills will automatically improve your speaking too? When you listen carefully and regularly, you start to hear natural sentence patterns. You begin to understand where native speakers pause, what words they emphasize, how they link sounds together. And little by little, you start to copy those patterns in your own speech, without even trying. That's how powerful listening is. Sometimes we think we're bad at speaking English, but the real issue is that we're not used to hearing English in natural situations. Maybe you studied English in school, with a teacher who spoke slowly and clearly. Maybe you learned with textbooks or apps that didn't show you how English sounds in real life. So when you watch a movie or try to speak to someone from London or New York or Sydney, you feel lost. That's normal. But here's the good news. Your brain can learn to understand those fast, real-life conversations with the right kind of listening practice. And this isn't just about understanding others. It's also about feeling confident in yourself. Think about it. If you feel like you can't follow what someone is saying, you might feel nervous to reply. You might avoid conversations altogether. But once you start training your ears and building your confidence, that anxiety starts to go away. You'll feel ready to join in, ask questions, and express yourself clearly. Listening builds understanding, and understanding builds confidence. One thing I always say is, listening is not passive. It's active. You're not just hearing sounds, you're paying attention to meaning, to rhythm, to emotion. You're noticing how words are used in different contexts. You're recognizing familiar expressions, and you're learning new ones without needing to memorize them. That's how children learn language. They listen first. They listen a lot. And then they start speaking. You can do the same. Now, before we go any further, I want to invite you to be part of this journey with me. If you're enjoying this content, if you've ever found one of our episodes helpful, take a moment right now to subscribe to the podcast. It helps us grow and reach more English learners like you around the world. And if you can, leave a like or a rating. That way, I know that this is something you value, and I can keep creating new episodes to support you. You're not just a listener here. You're part of a global community of people who are working to become confident English speakers. And I'm here to walk that path with you. Let's be honest. Learning a language can be challenging. There are days when it feels slow, days when you think, I'll never get it. I've seen that struggle in many people I've taught, and I want to tell you something important. You are doing better than you think. Every minute you spend listening, every time you try again after making a mistake, every small step counts. Language learning is not about being perfect. It's about being consistent. It's about staying curious and open, even when it's hard. Sometimes we wait for the perfect time to start practicing. We wait until we feel ready, until we know more, until we're not afraid. But the truth is, That moment might never come unless we take action. That's why I always say, start small, but start today. Even if you listen to just one short English video or podcast clip a day, it makes a difference. Your brain starts to adapt, your ears become sharper, your confidence grows. Don't underestimate what 5 focused minutes of listening can do. And here's something else I want you to remember. The goal is not to understand every single word. The goal is to understand the meaning, the intention, the message. Native speakers often skip words, shorten them, or change them based on how they feel. So it's okay if you don't catch everything. What matters is that you understand enough to respond, to connect, and to keep the conversation going. That's real communication. So if you've ever felt shy, nervous, or stuck when speaking English, let's take that pressure off. You don't need perfect grammar. You don't need a huge vocabulary. You just need to listen with intention and practice a little every day. That's how you build real fluency. That's how you become someone who can have clear, natural conversations, not just in English, but in any language. And remember, you are not learning alone. You are part of this community, a space where making mistakes is okay, where progress is personal, where your effort is seen and appreciated. I'm so happy you're here, and I can't wait to share more with you today. Let me tell you about Marta, someone who reminded me of so many learners I've worked with. Marta lives in Madrid and works as a marketing assistant at a large international company. She's always been a hardworking, ambitious person. Her job requires her to attend meetings with colleagues from different countries: the UK, the US, Canada, and sometimes even Australia. From the beginning, she believed that the way to show her fluency was by speaking quickly. She thought speed meant confidence. She thought that the faster she talked, the more fluent she would seem. But the problem was, every time she joined a Zoom call or a meeting in person, something unexpected happened. She couldn't keep up. When native speakers spoke naturally, using idioms, reducing sounds, talking fast, it felt like the words just passed her by. She understood the first few seconds, then got lost in the middle. Sometimes she caught the last sentence, but by then, the topic had already moved forward. It was frustrating. She found herself nodding without understanding, writing down half sentences in her notebook, and hoping she could figure out the meaning later. At first, Marta thought she needed to speak more. She forced herself to jump into conversations. She tried to fill every silence with her voice. She practiced long phrases and memorized industry vocabulary. But instead of helping, it only made her more anxious. She was so focused on what she was going to say next that she didn't really hear what other people were saying. And the worst part? She often gave the wrong response because she had misunderstood the question. Her confidence dropped. She started avoiding meetings. She told herself, maybe I'm just not good enough at this. But everything changed one day when she was watching a recorded company webinar. It was a presentation given by a manager from London. The speaker was explaining a new marketing strategy, and he spoke fast, using natural expressions and typical British intonation. Marta paused the video and turned on the subtitles. She watched the entire presentation once, then replayed it again, this time trying to focus only on the speaker's voice. No subtitles, just listening. At first, she struggled. But then, something shifted. She noticed that certain phrases kept repeating. She caught the way the speaker didn't say each word clearly, but instead connected words together. Going to became gonna. Did you sounded like didja. These small things suddenly became clearer. She realized that the reason she was missing meaning in conversations wasn't because she didn't know the vocabulary, it was because her ears weren't trained to hear English the way it's really spoken. That was the turning point for her. From then on, Marta made listening her #1 priority. Every morning, before starting work, she watched a short English interview, sometimes 5 minutes, sometimes 10. She always watched it twice. The first time with subtitles, the second time without. She wasn't trying to understand every single word anymore. She focused on the message, on the speaker's emotion, and on the patterns in pronunciation. She even started repeating short sentences out loud, imitating the speaker's rhythm and tone. Over the next few weeks, things started to change. In meetings, she began to feel more relaxed. She still didn't understand everything, but she understood enough. Enough to respond naturally. Enough to ask a follow-up question. Enough to feel part of the conversation instead of just a quiet observer. Her colleagues noticed the difference. One person even told her, "You've become a better communicator. You sound more confident now." But Marta knew the real reason wasn't that she had learned more words. It was that she had learned to listen better. One of the most powerful lessons she shared with me was this. I used to think that understanding meant knowing every word. But now I understand that real communication is about connection, not perfection. That's something I want everyone listening to this podcast to remember. You don't need to understand every single detail to be part of a conversation. You need to listen for meaning. You need to notice patterns. You need to feel the flow of the language. Marta's story is so important because it shows us that fluency doesn't always come from speaking more. Sometimes it comes from slowing down, from observing, from allowing yourself to become comfortable with silence, from paying attention to how people actually speak, not just how they write or how textbooks present the language. When you listen deeply, you begin to recognize not just the words, but the rhythm, the tone, and the intention behind them. And that's what leads to natural, confident communication. There's something else Marta did that really made a difference. She started keeping a small notebook of useful expressions she heard during her listening practice. Not complex phrases, just natural ones, like, "That makes sense," or "I see what you, mean," or "Let me think about that." She practiced these aloud, one by one, until they felt comfortable. These were the phrases that helped her respond naturally in meetings. She wasn't preparing scripted answers anymore. She was listening, understanding, and reacting in real time. This change didn't happen overnight, but it did happen because she showed up every day with a clear goal: to train her ears, to stop trying to speak fast just to seem fluent, and instead focus on understanding the flow of real English. And that shift made all the difference. Marta now says that she feels more connected in meetings, more relaxed in group conversations, and even more curious when she listens to English content, because she's no longer afraid of what she doesn't know. She listens with interest, not with fear. I wanted to share Marta's story with you because I know many of you might feel the same way she did. You want to sound fluent. You want to keep up. You want to be part of fast conversations without feeling lost. And I'm here to tell you, that's possible. But it starts with listening. It starts with letting go of the idea that fluency means speed, and embracing the idea that fluency means connection. Marta did it. And so can you. If there's one message I want to share with you today, it's this. Simpler English leads to more natural flow. So many learners come to me and say, "Julia, I want to sound professional, intelligent, fluent." And I always nod because that desire is valid. Of course you want to express yourself well. But then they tell me they're memorizing complex vocabulary, advanced grammar structures, formal sentence patterns, and yet they still feel stuck. They still feel like conversations are hard, like speaking makes them freeze. And do you know why that happens? Because when you try to speak in complex English before you've built listening confidence, you're adding unnecessary pressure to every sentence you say. Let's be honest. We've all done it. We've all thought that using longer words would make us sound smarter, that if we spoke with technical terms, we'd impress others. But what usually happens is the opposite. You start thinking too much. You pause, you doubt yourself, and the sentence falls apart before you even finish it. You might forget the word halfway through, or you mispronounce it and feel embarrassed. The more you try to be perfect, the more unnatural you sound. And the more unnatural you sound, the harder it is to connect with people. Now let's flip that. Imagine you're in a conversation and instead of reaching for difficult words, you use the simple ones you already know. Words that are easy to pronounce. Phrases that feel comfortable. Suddenly, you're not thinking so hard, you're just speaking. You're flowing. And people understand you clearly. You feel more relaxed. That's what I call real fluency. Not sounding like a textbook, but sounding like a real person. Someone who communicates with ease. And clarity. Even native speakers use simple English in most conversations. Think about it. Do they say, "I am thoroughly delighted by this opportunity"? Or do they say, "I'm really happy about this"? Most of the time, it's the second one. Do they say, "I shall endeavor to resolve this issue"? Or just, "I'll try to fix it"? Again, it's the simple version. That's how people speak in the real world. And that's the kind of English you want to build your flow with. One of the reasons simpler English works so well is because it mirrors how people actually talk. When you listen to native speakers in podcasts, interviews, or casual conversations, you'll notice that certain phrases come up again and again. Expressions like, I'm not sure, that sounds good, let's find out, or what do you mean? These phrases are short, easy to remember, and incredibly useful. They help you move the conversation forward without stopping to search for the perfect word. I've seen even advanced learners make breakthroughs by going back to basics. I remember one student from Paris who had been learning English for over 10 years. Her vocabulary was strong and she could write beautifully, but when it came to speaking, she hesitated. Every sentence was slow and careful, like she was editing herself in real time. One day, I asked her to speak using only the 500 most common English words. At first, she laughed, but when she tried it, something amazing happened. She spoke more smoothly. She felt less nervous. And her personality finally came through in English. Why? Because she wasn't trying to perform. She was just communicating. That's the power of simple language. It removes the barriers. It gives you space to think, to breathe, to connect. It frees you from the fear of making a mistake. And when your listening improves, when you start hearing these common patterns again and again, they start to live inside you. You don't need to memorize them anymore. They become automatic. That's when English stops being something you study and starts being something you live. Let me give you a practical example. If you listen to a native speaker ordering food at a cafe, they don't usually say, "May I kindly request a caffeinated beverage with non-fat milk, please?" They say, "Can I get a coffee with skim milk?" Simple, direct, and clear. That's the kind of English you'll hear every day, and the kind you should practice listening to. Because when you hear it often, you start to repeat it. And when you repeat it, it becomes yours. So how do you get there? Start by choosing listening materials that use clear conversational English. Don't worry about watching high-level academic lectures if your goal is everyday fluency. Watch interviews, casual conversations, English YouTube channels made for learners, or story-based podcasts like this one. Focus on understanding the tone, the rhythm, and the key phrases people use again and again. Then, repeat them out loud. Practice them until they feel like part of your own speaking style. You can also challenge yourself in a gentle way. Try to retell a story you heard in English, but using only short, simple sentences. For example, he woke up late, he missed the train, he called his boss, she said it's okay. It might sound basic, but you're building confidence. And later, when your brain is ready, those simple sentences will grow into more complex ones, naturally, without pressure. Another idea is to keep a small list of useful phrases you hear in daily conversations. Keep it realistic, not formal, not perfect. Just things like, "That's fine," "No problem," "I didn't catch that," or "Could you say that again?" These expressions may seem small, but they give you powerful tools to keep any conversation going. And they're easy to remember because they match the real English you hear when you listen every day. I want you to remember this. Learning a language is not a performance. It's not about showing off how many big words you know. It's about creating connection. And connection happens when people understand each other. When you use simpler English, you open the door to those real moments of connection, where you don't just speak, but you're heard and understood. So the next time you feel the urge to make your English sound more advanced, stop and ask yourself, can I say this in a simpler way? If the answer is yes, go for it. There is no shame in using the basic tools. In fact, that's how native speakers talk. That's how the most effective communicators speak, with clarity, with purpose, and with ease. As you keep listening to English each day, I encourage you to focus on flow instead of complexity. Let the patterns sink in. Let the expressions repeat in your mind. Say them out loud, play with them, and most of all, give yourself permission to speak in the way that feels natural. That's where fluency truly begins. Let me introduce you to someone I think many of you will relate to. Luca, a computer science student from Milan. When I first heard Luca's story, it reminded me of the same pattern I see in so many dedicated learners. He was doing everything he thought he was supposed to do. He had notebooks filled with vocabulary lists, flashcards for irregular verbs, grammar exercises from textbooks, and apps full of daily challenges. On paper, It looked like he was making progress. But in real conversations, he froze. He didn't feel fluent. He didn't feel ready. Luca told me that. Even after months of study, when someone asked him a simple question in English, something like, "What are you working on this week?" his mind would go blank. He'd start thinking in Italian, then translating to English in his head, and by the time he opened his mouth to answer, the conversation had already moved on. He felt frustrated, even embarrassed. And worse, he felt like maybe he just wasn't good at speaking. But deep down, Luca wasn't lacking effort. What he was missing was rhythm. He had all the ingredients: vocabulary, grammar, motivation, but no flow. That natural feeling of speaking without tension, of understanding without overthinking. So one day, he decided to try something different. No more lists, no more silent reading. He wanted to train his ear, so he started listening to short English audio clips every morning before class. Podcasts, short interviews, scenes from English TV shows, anything that had real, natural English being spoken at a normal pace. At first, he didn't try to understand every word. In fact, he told me he stopped translating completely. Instead, he just listened. Not with the goal of remembering everything, but with the goal of feeling the language. He listened for rhythm, for stress, for where the voice went up and where it came down. He paid attention to how speakers paused before important words, how they connected sounds, how emotion changed the speed or tone of their voice. It was like listening to music. He didn't need to analyze every lyric. He just let the sound wash over him. Within just a couple of weeks, he noticed something new. When someone spoke to him in English, his reaction time was faster. His brain didn't panic as much. It was as if something inside him had shifted. The words still came slowly sometimes, but they came more naturally. He was no longer searching for the perfect sentence. He was responding to the feeling of the conversation. He told me, "It was the first time I didn't try to translate. I just answered." That was a big moment for Luca, because up until that point, English had been something he studied, something he controlled. But now it was something he felt. He started to recognize common patterns without needing to memorize them. When he heard someone say, "You know what I mean?" he didn't pause to look for meaning. He already understood it. When someone said, "I'm not really sure," he didn't think about grammar. He just heard the tone, the hesitation, and the message behind it. He was listening like a speaker, not like a student. Another thing Luca did that helped him grow was shadowing. After listening to each audio clip once, he would go back and repeat short phrases out loud, trying to match the speaker's rhythm exactly. Not just the words, but the pauses, the energy, the emotion. It wasn't about sounding perfect. It was about syncing with the language. He would pause, rewind, mimic, and slowly feel more comfortable using those same expressions in his own voice. He called it copying the music of English, and I loved that description. This kind of listening changed everything for Luca. He stopped relying on textbooks and started building his fluency from the ground up, by sound, by feeling, by repetition. And once he had that rhythm inside him, speaking became easier. He could join group conversations without fear. He could ask questions in class, and even make jokes in English. His confidence grew not because he learned more rules, but because he let the language become a part of his everyday life. What impressed me most about Luca's approach was how consistent he was. It didn't take hours of practice each day. He kept it simple. 10 minutes of audio in the morning. Just enough to train his ears, to warm up his brain, and to connect emotionally with the language. He told me that this routine gave him something to look forward to. Even on busy days, he found time to listen, while brushing his teeth, riding the tram, or walking to class. It became part of his life, not just a task on a to-do list. And over time, that small daily habit gave him something bigger than just improved listening. It gave him rhythm. And with that rhythm came confidence, natural flow, and the ability to stay present in English conversations without fear or pressure. Luca's story reminds me how important it is to trust the process and stay connected to the sound of the language. If you're spending all your time reading silently or memorizing words, in isolation, you might be missing the most powerful part of English, the way it feels when it's spoken. And that feeling, that musical rhythm of English, is what will carry you through real conversations, help you speak with ease, and make English part of your everyday rhythm too. One of the most effective tools I've ever taught English learners is something called chunk listening. If you've never heard of it before, let me explain what it is and why it's so powerful. When most people try to understand English, they focus on individual words. They try to catch each word as it comes and translate it in their head. But that approach can make listening feel slow, overwhelming, and sometimes even impossible, especially when native speakers talk fast or use informal language. What you really need to do is listen the way native speakers think, in chunks, not in single words. A chunk is a group of words that naturally go together. Think about how you say, "How are you?" or "I don't know," or "Do you want to go?" You don't usually stop and think about each individual word in those phrases. You hear the whole thing as one unit. That's exactly what chunk listening trains you to do. It teaches your ears and your brain to recognize these little blocks of language, which then become the building blocks of fluency. When you start listening for chunks, something interesting happens. The language becomes less confusing. Instead of trying to understand everything word by word, you start to hear whole phrases as if they were a single idea. That's how native speakers process language. They're not thinking about grammar rules while they speak. They're pulling from thousands of ready-made phrases they've used or heard since they were children. That's what makes their speaking sound so smooth and effortless. And you can do the same thing by training yourself to hear those chunks and use them naturally. Let's say you hear the sentence, "What do you want to do later?" If you're thinking word by word, your brain has to catch what do you want to do and then put them together. That takes time. But if you've practiced the chunk, "What do you want to?" before, your brain will recognize it immediately, like hearing a melody you know by heart. You won't have to think about it, it will just click. That's the magic of chunk listening. So how can you start practicing this technique? First, choose a short piece of audio, maybe a podcast episode, a short dialogue, or a scene from a show. Keep it under 1 minute. You're not trying to listen for long periods, you're trying to listen deeply. Then play one sentence and repeat it out loud. After that, break it into parts. If the sentence is, "I'm not sure I can do that," you might break it into 3 chunks. I'm not sure. I can. Do that. Say each part slowly, clearly, and with the same rhythm you hear in the speaker's voice. Don't worry if it feels awkward at first. It's completely normal. You're training your ears and your brain to notice something new. At first, it will feel like you're copying, but over time, these patterns will start to feel familiar. You'll notice that the same chunks appear again and again in different conversations. That repetition is how your brain begins to recognize and produce natural English without hesitation. One thing I often recommend is to write down the chunks you hear and practice them during the day. You don't need to write the whole sentence, just the useful piece. For example, "I'm not sure. It depends. That sounds good. Let me think." These are expressions people use all the time in real conversations. If you hear them often and repeat them often, they'll become part of your own speaking. The great thing about chunk listening is that it helps with more than just understanding. It also improves your speaking rhythm, your pronunciation, and your confidence. Because you're practicing language in natural units, your sentences start to flow better. You don't pause awkwardly in the middle of an idea. You don't get stuck between words. You speak the way people actually talk, with a rhythm that feels real and alive. One learner I worked with in Munich had been studying English for years, but his speech was always a little slow and robotic. He paused after every word and sounded unsure, even when he knew what he wanted to say. When we started practicing chunk listening together, he began to feel the rhythm of the language for the E. First time. He told me, "It's like I finally stopped trying to build the sentence piece by piece, and now I just say it." That was a breakthrough moment for him. He stopped overthinking. He started communicating. Another helpful tip is to focus on chunks that you can actually use in your daily life. If you often speak at work, pay attention to phrases like, "Let me check on that," or "I'll get back to you." If you're learning English for travel, practice chunks like, "How much is this?" or "Can you help me find?" When you hear these in context, pause the audio and repeat them. Say them until they sound natural. You can even record yourself and compare. It's not about being perfect. It's about sounding real and building that inner rhythm. The more you do this, the more you'll notice your listening improving in other situations too. When you watch a movie, you'll suddenly recognize a phrase you practiced. When someone speaks quickly in a conversation, you'll catch more than you used to. And slowly, the language that once sounded fast or confusing will start to make sense. It becomes familiar, and that familiarity brings calm, control, and clarity. What I love about chunk listening is that it turns English into music. You stop hearing disconnected words and start hearing melody, rhythm, and flow. You begin to notice stress, which words are louder or softer, faster or slower, and that kind of listening helps your brain adapt to real spoken English, which is often messy, fast, and full of emotion. Instead of getting lost, you learn to ride the wave of the language. The truth is, language is not just a list of words or a set of rules. It's a living, breathing thing that moves with emotion, purpose, and rhythm. Chunk listening connects you to that reality. It teaches you to hear English the way it's really used, not in a textbook, but in life. And once you can hear it that way, you can speak it that way too. So if you've been struggling to follow conversations, or if you feel like your speaking is too slow or too stiff, I invite you to try this. Start small. Choose one sentence a day, break it into chunks, repeat it, and let it sink in. It doesn't have to be complicated. In fact, the simpler, the better. Because when you train with real, simple language, you build real, simple fluency. And that's what helps you feel confident in every conversation. Anna's story is one I'll never forget, because it shows how something so small, a few minutes of focused practice each day, can completely change someone's confidence. Anna works as a hotel receptionist in Lisbon. She's warm, attentive, and always smiling when guests walk through the door. In person, she felt fairly comfortable speaking English, but every time the phone rang, her heart would race. On the phone, she couldn't rely on body language or facial expressions. She had to depend only on her ears and her words, and that made her nervous. She told me that when English-speaking guests called to ask about reservations or directions, she often panicked. The callers spoke fast, sometimes with unfamiliar accents. She'd catch a word or two, maybe check in, maybe late arrival, but miss the rest. And because she didn't want to sound unprofessional, she avoided asking them to repeat. Instead, she would guess, or put them on hold to ask a colleague for help. Each call felt like a test she was failing. After a few difficult phone calls, Anna started dreading the sound of the phone ringing. She thought maybe the problem was her vocabulary. She started trying to memorize more hotel-related terms, thinking that would help her feel prepared, but it didn't. The issue wasn't a lack of words. The issue was speed. Real conversations move quickly, and when you're trying to process every word, translate in your head, and respond at the same time, it creates too much pressure. That's when I introduced her to the idea of practicing with chunks, short, useful phrases that are easy to remember and repeat. Anna began by recording herself saying common phrases that she might use during phone calls. She also saved voicemail messages in English from guests, and instead of listening once and deleting them, she played them several times. The first time, she'd just try to understand the general meaning. Then she'd listen again and write down key phrases that repeated, things like, "Can I speak to someone about?" Or, "I'd like to confirm my reservation." She wasn't trying to understand every detail. She was training her ears to hear the patterns. After that, she started repeating those phrases out loud. Every morning before work, she spent 5 minutes practicing with her own voice. She'd say things like, "Good morning, how can I help you?" and "Just a moment, please," again and again. Sometimes she would exaggerate the rhythm and stress of the sentence just to feel the flow more clearly. It felt strange at first, like pretending to be someone else. But slowly, something began to change. Those phrases became automatic. She no longer had to search for them when the phone rang. Her brain didn't freeze. The words were already there, ready to use. Even better, she started recognizing them when other people used them. Instead of trying to catch every single word, she focused on the chunks. She listened for meaning. She trusted that she didn't have to get it all. She just needed to understand enough to respond calmly and clearly. One morning, she received a call from a guest who spoke very quickly with an Irish accent. Normally, she would have panicked, but this time she listened for the chunks. She caught phrases like, "running a bit late and want to make sure." From those key expressions, she understood the message. The guest was going to arrive later than planned and wanted to confirm the reservation. She replied without hesitation, "No problem, your reservation is confirmed. We'll see you later tonight." After the call, she smiled to herself. She had done it. What made the biggest difference for Anna wasn't more grammar or vocabulary study. It was the practice of listening to real language, picking out the repeated phrases and saying them out loud until they felt natural. It gave her control over her own English. She no longer waited for confidence to appear. She built it, one phrase at a time. She even started using her chunk list to help other colleagues at the hotel. When new staff joined and said they were nervous about answering the phone in English, Anna shared the phrases that helped her. She made flashcards with expressions like, "Can I transfer your call?" and "Thank you for waiting." She told them, "You don't need to be perfect. You just need a few good phrases you can trust." And those simple tools made a huge difference. What I love about Anna's story is how honest and practical it is. She didn't try to become fluent overnight. She didn't wait until she had perfect grammar. She picked a real problem, phone calls, and chose one. Method to solve it, chunk practice. And she stuck with it. Just a few minutes each day. Nothing complicated. But because she stayed consistent, the results were real. Today, Anna feels calm when she answers the phone. She can guide a guest through the check-in process, give directions, or confirm a reservation without hesitation. She still doesn't understand everything, and she doesn't need to. What matters is that she listens with purpose, speaks with clarity, and connects with the people she's helping. That's communication. That's fluency. That's what confidence sounds like. She once told me, "When I focused on small pieces of language, I stopped being afraid of the whole conversation." That's something I want you to remember. You don't have to master everything at once. You don't need to speak fast, use advanced words, or be perfect. If you can master just a few useful chunks and repeat them until they feel natural, you're already halfway there. Anna's daily practice gave her more than just phrases. It gave her peace of mind. And now, when the phone rings, she doesn't feel fear. She feels ready, because she knows the words are already in her. And that's the power of training your ears, your brain, and your voice, one chunk at a time. One thing I always tell my students is that listening passively might feel like you're learning, but it's not enough if your goal is to have real, clear conversations in English. Think about it like this. If you want to get stronger, physically, you can't just sit in a gym and watch other people work out. You have to move your body, lift weights, feel the effort. The same is true with your listening skills. If you just play English audio in the background while doing the dishes or scrolling through your phone, that's a start. But it's not going to create the deep changes you want. For that, you need active listening. Active listening means engaging your brain. It means giving your full attention to the sounds, the words, the tone, and the rhythm of the speaker. It means focusing with purpose, not just hearing the language, but interacting with it. That's what transforms your brain. That's what helps you actually remember, understand, and later use what you hear. The great thing is, this doesn't have to take hours. Even 5 minutes a day, if used well, can create powerful progress. I always suggest starting small. Choose a short piece of content, maybe a video, a podcast episode, or a clip from a show you like. Ideally, something with real, natural speech. Then listen to it once just to get the idea. After that, go back and listen again, this time with a pen and notebook if you can. Pause after each sentence. Ask yourself, what did I hear? What words do I recognize? What was the tone of voice? Can I repeat that sentence out loud? If you can, speak along with the speaker. This technique is called shadowing, and it's one of my favorites. You listen to a phrase and repeat it immediately, trying to match the speaker's rhythm and emotion. It's not about being perfect. It's about getting your mouth used to the music of English. It's about training your brain to hear full phrases and your voice to respond naturally. At first, you might stumble. That's okay. It's like training a muscle. You don't get strong from just one workout. It's the repetition that builds strength over time. One listener from Berlin shared his daily routine with me, and I think it's a great example. Every morning, before checking his email or starting work, he listens to a 2-minute podcast in English. He chooses one section, maybe 20 or 30 seconds, and plays it 3 or 4 times. First, he listens with full attention. Then he writes down the sentences he hears. Then he says them out loud. If he misses a word, he goes back and rewinds. He told me it takes less than 10 minutes, but it sets the tone for his entire day. He feels more connected to English, more confident when speaking, and more prepared for any conversation that might come up. I love that story because it shows how a small habit, done consistently, creates real change. When you listen actively, you start noticing patterns. You begin to hear the way people actually use the language, how they link words, how they stress certain parts of a sentence, how they pause. These details matter so much more than any grammar rule in a textbook. They're the key to understanding fast speech and speaking naturally yourself. And something magical happens when you do this every day. English stops feeling like something outside of you. It becomes part of your routine, part of your voice, part of how you think. You stop needing subtitles as much. You start catching jokes, tone, sarcasm. You hear the emotion behind the words. And that's when your listening moves from passive to powerful. Another tip I give is to choose content that really interests you. If you love cooking, watch English cooking videos. If you're into travel, listen to travel vlogs or travel podcasts. If you like storytelling, choose podcasts with personal stories or interviews. When you care about the content, you'll be more engaged. You'll want to understand. That curiosity will push you to listen more carefully and more often. There's also value in repetition. Don't be afraid to listen to the same audio more than once. In fact, it's one of the best things you can do. The first time, you're just getting used to the speaker's voice. Second time, you start to catch more details. The third time, you begin to recognize patterns. By the fourth or fifth listen, you'll start anticipating what comes next. That's your brain absorbing the language on a deeper level. Writing down phrases you hear can also help. You don't have to write everything. Just choose 1 or 2 sentences that feel useful. Keep a small notebook or a document on your phone where you collect your favorite expressions. Then, review them before bed or practice. Saying them out loud when you're walking or waiting in line. These small habits build fluency in a way that feels natural and not forced. You might be wondering, but what if I don't understand everything? That's okay. In fact, it's expected. You don't need to understand every word to benefit from active listening. Focus on what you do understand. Get the main idea. Catch the emotion. Recognize the chunks of language that come up again and again. Over time, those pieces will grow and your comprehension will expand without you even realizing it. I know life can be busy and it's not always easy to set aside time to practice. But if you can give yourself just 5 focused minutes a day, you'll be amazed at what's possible. Turn off distractions. Put in your headphones. Choose something short. Listen with your full attention. Speak what you hear. Repeat. And then let your brain do the rest. That's how habits are formed. That's how skills grow. And here's something else to keep in mind. Every time you choose to listen actively, you're telling your brain, this matters. I want to understand. I want to grow. That intention is powerful. It turns English from a subject into a skill, from a task into a tool, from a goal into a daily habit. And the more you do it, the easier it becomes. So don't wait for the perfect moment. You don't need perfect conditions. You just need to start. Choose a time, choose a sound, choose your focus, and then listen with your heart and your mind fully present. Because that's where real progress happens. Not in the background, but in the moment, when you decide to be part of the language. Not just a listener, but a learner in action. Let me tell you about Jonas, an architecture student from Berlin, who found a creative and powerful way to improve his English listening skills without changing his schedule or adding hours of study to his day. His story is such a great example of how everyday moments, even quiet routine ones, can become opportunities for real language growth. For Jonas, it all started on the subway. Every morning and evening, he spent about 25 minutes on the U-Bahn commuting to university. Like many of us, at first he used that time to scroll through his phone, check emails, or just stare out the window. But he began to feel frustrated with his English progress. He understood grammar and he could read well, but speaking still felt difficult. Listening to fast, natural English was stressful. He couldn't keep up. So he decided to turn his subway rides into something more useful, a kind of mobile English classroom. He downloaded a few English podcasts to his phone. Not the ones that were too formal or too long, but the ones where people spoke naturally. Interviews, stories, conversations. He told me he preferred voices that sounded calm and relaxed because they helped him focus. At first, he just listened. He played the same short episodes every morning, trying to catch the overall meaning, but soon he started doing something more. He paused after each sentence, whispered it quietly to himself, and then pressed play again. He didn't care if people around him noticed. He had his headphones in, and he was speaking just under his breath. Nothing loud, nothing obvious. Just enough to hear his own voice shaping the same sounds he had just heard. This simple act of repeating, of imitating not just the words but the rhythm and tone, changed everything for Jonas. Because the more he did, the more comfortable he felt. At first, he was just copying. But after a few weeks, something shifted. He started responding. He told me one morning he was listening to a podcast guest talk about a trip to New York. The speaker said, "It was really overwhelming at first, but I loved the energy." Without thinking, Jonas whispered, "Yeah, I think I'd feel the same." It was spontaneous. He didn't plan to answer. It just came out. And in that moment, he realized that his brain had stopped translating. He wasn't only repeating anymore, he was reacting. His thoughts were starting to form in English. That's a huge moment for any language learner. When English stops being something you build word by word and starts becoming the language you think in. Jonas said it felt strange at first, like part of his mind had switched channels. But then he felt proud. Because he knew that all those quiet subway rides, all those whispered repetitions, were working. His English was becoming more natural, not just in vocabulary, but in the way his brain processed the language. He began choosing different types of content. Some days he listened to short personal stories. Other days he picked topics related to architecture, so he could practice both everyday English and professional terms. He would pause when he heard something useful, say it aloud, and then imagine how he might use that phrase in a real conversation. For example, if the speaker said, "That's a good point, but I see it differently," Jonas would repeat it and then add his own opinion. It became a game. How many ways could he engage with what he heard? Soon these little mental conversations followed him beyond the subway. He started thinking in English while walking to class or waiting in line at the cafe. He would hear a question in his head and answer it in English, sometimes even surprising himself with how naturally the words came. It wasn't about speaking fast or perfectly. It was about flow, about, comfort, about being present with the language, every day, even in small moments. One of my favorite things Jonas shared with me was that this habit also helped reduce his fear of speaking. Before, he felt awkward joining English discussions in class. He worried about sounding slow or making mistakes. But after weeks of shadowing and mentally practicing responses, he began to participate more. He'd hear a question from a classmate and feel ready to answer. He didn't need to pause and build a sentence in his mind. He just spoke. And each time he did, his confidence grew. What made his practice so effective wasn't just repetition. It was the emotional connection he built with the language. He chose topics that interested him. He listened to voices that felt natural. He wasn't studying English. He was experiencing it. That shift, from passive to active, from background sound to daily interaction, is what turned a simple habit into a transformational tool. And the best part? He didn't change his routine. He didn't add more study time. He just made better use of the time he already had. That's something anyone can do. Whether you're on a train, waiting for a bus, walking the dog, or sitting in traffic, that time can become practice time. Not with pressure, but with intention. Jonas used those quiet minutes to give himself space to explore English in a new way. No textbooks, no tests, just real voices, real words, and his own quiet repetition. Over time, he built not just better listening skills, but a stronger internal voice, one that thought, reacted, and spoke in English. It didn't happen overnight, but it happened, one whisper at a time. If you've ever felt like your listening isn't improving, or like you're stuck between understanding and actually using English, remember Jonas. All he needed was his phone, his headphones, and the decision to turn a daily commute into something meaningful. And by doing that, he gave himself something more valuable than just new vocabulary. He built a habit of confidence, one sentence at a time. One of my favorite techniques for improving natural speech is called shadowing. If you've never heard of it before, don't worry. It's simple, powerful, and you can start today. Shadowing means you repeat what you hear in English, ideally at the same time or just a second after. Imagine you're someone's echo. You're not reading a script. You're listening, and your voice follows theirs. It's one of the best ways to train pronunciation, rhythm, and listening, all at once. And what I love most about it is that it helps you sound more natural, more connected to the language, without needing to overthink grammar or vocabulary. When you shadow, you're doing more than just repeating sounds. You're studying the music of English. You're listening for stress, intonation, the way some words are linked together, the pauses, the emotion. You start to feel the flow of the language, not just the meaning of each word. That's exactly how native speakers speak. They don't stop and think about each individual word. They speak in phrases, in patterns, in rhythm. And shadowing helps you develop that same natural rhythm. So how do you start? First, pick a voice that you like, a speaker you admire, someone whose tone, pace, and clarity feel good to your ears. This could be an actor, a podcast host, a YouTube creator, or even a TED speaker. It's important to choose someone whose speech is clear and natural. You can use a scene from a movie, a short interview, a story podcast, anything that feels real and interesting to you. Then, play a short section, maybe 5 to 10 seconds. Pause, go back, listen again. Then play it one more time and speak right after or along with the speaker. In the beginning, you might want to pause after each sentence. That's okay. It's important to give yourself time to understand and repeat. Don't worry if you miss words. Don't worry if your voice sounds different. This isn't about being perfect. It's about training your brain and your mouth to work together. You're building muscle memory. You're teaching your mouth to move like a native speaker's mouth. You're training your ears to recognize patterns and your voice to produce them. As you get more comfortable, you can try shadowing without pausing. Let the speaker continue and do your best to keep up. You'll probably fall behind sometimes, especially if the speech is fast or includes unfamiliar words. That's normal. The goal is not to match every word perfectly. The goal is to stay with the rhythm. If you miss something, just keep going. That's how your brain learns to stay in the conversation, even when everything isn't clear. One of my students from Barcelona used this method with scenes from his favorite TV series. Every evening he picked a 2-minute clip, listened once with subtitles, and then again without. Then he started shadowing. He copied the actor's exact tone, their emotion, even their little pauses, or changes in voice. After a few weeks, I noticed a huge difference in his speaking. He was smoother, faster, and more expressive. He didn't hesitate as much because he wasn't translating in his head anymore. He was reacting in real time, just like in the show. Another student from Paris told me she used shadowing with English news podcasts. She didn't understand every word at first, but she focused on the rhythm and stress. Over time, those repeated news phrases, in other news, according to the report, at the end of the day, became part of her own speech. They came naturally, without effort. That's the power of hearing and repeating language in context. You absorb it like a song, not a rule book. What's really special about shadowing is that it helps with more than just speaking. It sharpens your listening too. You start noticing small details. How did you becomes did ya. How going to sounds like gonna. How intonation rises in questions or falls in statements. These are the things that make real English feel fast or hard to follow. But when you shadow, those same things become familiar. Your ears learn to expect them. Your mouth learns to use them. You stop fighting the speed and start flowing with it. You can also use shadowing to practice emotional tone. Let's say the speaker sounds excited or tired or serious. Try to match that feeling. You're not just copying the words, you're copying the energy of the speech. This is so helpful if you want to sound more expressive and more human in your conversations. When you practice sounding curious, calm, polite, surprised, it becomes easier to show those feelings when you speak. And communication becomes more natural, more complete. If you're someone who feels shy or unsure when speaking English, shadowing is a great way to build confidence privately. You don't need a partner, you don't need to schedule a class, you just need your voice, your ears, and a recording. Do it in the car while cooking or in your bedroom with headphones on. It can be your own quiet moment of progress. And the more you do it, the stronger your English voice becomes. I've also had learners use shadowing as a warm-up before important meetings or interviews. Just 5 minutes of repeating English sentences out loud helps clear their mind, focus their brain, and get their voice ready. It's like stretching before a workout. You're telling your brain, we're about to use English. Let's wake up and get ready. That simple step makes a big difference in how confident and connected you feel when the conversation starts. Another tip is to record yourself while shadowing. Play back your voice and compare it to the original. Don't be too critical. Just listen. Notice where your tone matches, where your speed changes, where your pronunciation is close or different. Over time, you'll hear improvement. It's motivating to realize that each day your voice is sounding more fluent, more relaxed, more natural. Shadowing is not just about speaking fast. It's about speaking well. It's about building the kind of English that feels easy to use, easy to hear, and easy to trust. When you copy real, natural language, your own English becomes real and natural too. That's how you prepare for real conversations, not by memorizing long lists, but by echoing the language you want to use. So whenever you hear a phrase you like, stop and repeat it. Let it live in your mouth. Make it part of your toolbox. Because the more you repeat the language you admire, the more it becomes yours. And that's what fluency is. Not perfection, but connection. Not just understanding others, but sounding like someone who lives in the rhythm of the language. Shadowing helps you get there, one sentence at a time. Fluency in English is something many learners dream of, but the truth is it doesn't happen overnight. It's a journey, a process that unfolds slowly and steadily, and that's why small daily steps matter so much. I want you to imagine this journey like planting a tree. You don't see the full tree grow in a day. You water it a little bit every day. Sometimes the progress feels invisible. Other times, you get little signs. A new leaf, a stronger branch. But if you keep going, season after season, that tree will grow tall and strong. That's exactly how your English fluency develops. One of the biggest mistakes I see learners make is trying to do too much at once or expecting quick results. You might spend hours studying grammar, memorizing long lists of words, or feeling frustrated because you can't keep up with native speakers. I understand that feeling because I've been there too. But I want you to shift your mindset. Instead of aiming for perfection, aim for progress. Instead of aiming to know everything, aim to understand more each day. Instead of aiming to speak perfectly, aim to speak with comfort and confidence. The truth is, spending just 5 to 10 minutes a day focused on listening can create huge changes over time. 5 to 10 minutes might sound small, but it's consistent practice that makes the difference. If you listen every day, even if it's just a short podcast episode, a video clip, or a few sentences you repeat, your brain begins to build new connections. You train your ears to recognize sounds and patterns. You build your mental library of phrases and expressions. You develop a natural rhythm and flow. And slowly but surely, your speaking improves without you even noticing it right away. Consistency is the secret ingredient here. It's better to do a little every day than to do a lot one day and then stop for a week. When you make listening a daily habit, you create a routine that your brain expects. That routine becomes a foundation for growth. I know life gets busy, and some days are harder than others, but if you can keep your commitment, even 5 minutes on a tough day, you're moving forward. That's more important than how fast you go. Being kind to yourself is also essential. Learning a language isn't easy, and it's not supposed to be perfect. You'll have moments where you don't understand. You'll have moments where you feel stuck or frustrated. That's normal and okay. What matters is that you keep going. Celebrate the small victories. When you understand a sentence without needing to translate, celebrate that. When you reply to someone without hesitation, celebrate that. Those moments are signs of real progress. They mean your brain is adapting, your skills are growing, and your confidence is building. I remember when I was learning English, I used to get discouraged when I couldn't catch every word or when my sentences didn't sound perfect. But over time, I realized the key was to accept imperfection and focus on communication. I learned to appreciate every small success, like understanding a joke, following a conversation, or making someone smile with my English. Those moments kept me motivated. They reminded me that progress was happening even when it wasn't obvious. So, if you ever feel overwhelmed or stuck, remind yourself that fluency is a long-term project. It's not a race, but a steady climb. And each small step, each time you listen, repeat, or speak, adds up. The more you practice, the easier English becomes. It moves from being something external to something inside you. It becomes part of your daily life, your thoughts, and your voice. You don't need to do everything perfectly. You don't need to understand every word. You just need to keep listening and keep trying. Trust that your brain is learning, even when it feels slow. Trust that your effort is worth it. The English you want, clear, natural, confident, is waiting for you on the other side of these small daily steps. I want to encourage you to create a simple listening habit that fits your life. Find a moment, maybe while having coffee in the morning, on your way to work, or before you go to sleep. Use that time to listen. Actively. Repeat phrases. Practice shadowing. Focus on the sounds and rhythm. And be proud of yourself for showing up, even when it's hard. Remember, learning English is not just about mastering a language. It's about opening doors to new people, new ideas, new experiences. Every minute you spend listening and practicing brings you closer to those possibilities. So be patient with yourself. Celebrate the small wins. Keep listening, keep speaking, and keep believing in your progress. That's how English becomes a natural part of who you are.